In this video, covering the structure and function of the gastrointestinal system, we will take just a snapshot of some of the key features of the GI system. First, let's start with the functions of the GI system. There are two major functions, digestion and endocrine functions. In the digestive functions of the GI system, we will break down food that we eat. The GI system also absorbs nutrients from the food, and it eliminates waste. It also is involved in the synthesis of some of our vitamins and the production of enzymes that are utilized in the digestive process. Endocrine functions of the GI system include regulation of appetite and nutrient intake and the use and storage of nutrients. The digestive system is made of the alimentary canal and accessory structures. The alimentary canal runs from the mouth to the anus. From the mouth, the alimentary canal moves into the pharynx and down the esophagus, where it then enters the stomach. From the stomach, we move into the small intestine, which includes the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. The small intestine then moves into the large intestine, where you have the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and the descending colon. The colon then enters into the rectum, down the anal canal, and finally to the anus. Note that this alimentary canal is considered to be external to the body. Accessory structures of the digestive system include the gallbladder, which stores bile, the liver, which is covered in a separate video and has multiple functions, including the production of bile, the pancreas, which releases enzymes into the digestive system for its exocrine function. The pancreas also has endocrine functions, such as production of insulin and other blood sugar regulatory hormones. And we have glands, such as our parotid, sublingual, and submandibular salivary glands that are assistive in the process of digestion. The esophagus connects the pharynx to the stomach, and you can find it behind the trachea. It's important to note the two sphincters in the esophagus. The first is the upper esophageal sphincter. This controls movement of food from the pharynx into the esophagus. As you travel down the esophagus to the stomach, you'll find the lower esophageal sphincter. This controls food going into the stomach. The lower esophageal sphincter is relaxed when we need food to pass into the stomach. And it's contracted and closed after eating to prevent stomach acids from backing up into the esophagus. These stomach acids could be harmful for the esophagus, as the esophagus is not built to live in an acidic environment. Weakness of the lower esophageal sphincter, such that it will no longer prevent acids from backing up into the esophagus, is a cause of gastroesophageal reflux disease, also known as GERD or acid reflux. The stomach is located between the esophagus and the duodenum. In the stomach, food is mixed together with our digestive juices, and it becomes a substance called chyme. So we don't digest our food in the order that we eat it. And so even if you don't let food touch on your plate, within the stomach it all gets mixed together and turns into chyme. The stomach then releases chyme into the small intestine through the duodenum. Note that this doesn't occur all at once, but it's a process that allows small amounts of chyme to move into the small intestine at a rate that the intestines can process the food. Therefore, an empty stomach is generally defined as 1 hour before eating and 2 hours after eating, because it takes up to 2 hours for that stomach to empty. You may notice if you've had an especially large meal, your stomach feels full for much longer than that 2-hour period. Let's look at the wall structure of the gastrointestinal tract. We will use this picture of the stomach mucosa as an example. So there are 4 layers in the walls of the GI system. We have a mucosal layer where we produce mucus so that we can lubricate and protect the system. The mucosal layer is made up of epithelial cells, a lamina propria, and a muscularis mucosae. Think about something like the esophagus or the small intestine. You're going to want lubrication to help things move through these pipes. In the stomach, you want that mucus to protect against the harsh environment of the stomach. The next layer is the submucosa. You can see that here. This is made of a dense connective tissue and adipose tissue or fat cells. Here you'll find our blood vessels, you can see in this picture, and our nerves innervate the GI system in this layer. You will also find glands that secrete digestive enzymes in the submucosal layer. The next layer is the muscularis externa. This is made up of layers of smooth muscle that help squeeze the GI tract so that things can move along. And then the final outer layer is the serosal layer. This is a serous membrane of epithelial and connective tissue and represents the outside of each of the organs. Let's take a closer look at this figure as we look at particularly the stomach mucosa, because there are some specialized cells that are important within the stomach. Within the lining of the stomach, we have cells that produce an alkaline mucus. Again, this mucus is very important because it protects that stomach from the acidic gastric enzymes that we use to start to chemically digest that food and turn it into chyme. You will also notice that prostaglandins are important in this mucosal production. And so for more information, look at the video on the arachidonic acid metabolism. Within the stomach, we have gastric pits. In this gastric pit, you can find gastric glands here. These secrete gastric juice. We also have specialized cells called parietal cells. These are the purplish cells up top. Parietal cells have 2 main functions. The first is they produce hydrochloric acid, which is the acid that provides the acidic environment in the stomach to start digesting the food. It also produces something called intrinsic factor. An intrinsic factor is necessary to absorb vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is important for DNA formation, and so without intrinsic factor, the body will not receive vitamin B12. Also, we have chief cells. Chief cells secrete a hormone called pepsinogen. And when pepsinogen meets the hydrochloric acid secreted by the parietal cells, it is then converted into pepsin. And then finally in the stomach, we have enteroendocrine cells. And you can see these cells here. They kind of look like little feet. These secrete multiple hormones, so it's got the word endocrine in it, including gastrin, which is a hormone that promotes gastric function. So it stimulates movement, it stimulates secretion of things. It's an overall general hormone that activates the digestive process within the stomach. And then we'll end this very brief overview with regulation of food intake. So we'll define a couple of words related to food intake. The first is hunger. Hunger is that sensation that stimulates a person to eat food. Now this is different from boredom when you're sitting on the couch watching Netflix shows on auto drive and you're bored and you just start snacking. That is not hunger. Hunger is a feeling that you have when you need nutrients, and this is controlled by the hypothalamus. Appetite is when you have a desire for a particular type of food. Like sometimes we just crave pizza. And then satiety is the feeling of fullness or decreased desire for food. And this is also controlled by the hypothalamus. This is what tells us we have had enough for this meal. We have short-term and long-term regulation of our food intake. So short-term regulation is this rapid feed mechanism that lets us know when we're hungry, and then it lets us know when it's full. So it signals the adequacy of food intake before digestion, and it promotes the absorption of nutrients into the blood. When we eat, after about 20 minutes, usually the hypothalamus will signal the suppression of appetite. This is why, for example, if you go back and get seconds right after you finish the first plate, you may not feel full yet. But if you wait 15-20 minutes, you may feel satisfied from that meal. The hormones involved in this process are cholecystokinin, or CCK. This responds to the entrance of fat in the duodenum. And we have another hormone called GLP-1, which is glucagon-like peptide 1. And when carbohydrates enter the small intestine, that will signal the release of these hormones. You can see where these hormones will feed back into the hypothalamus, letting the hypothalamus know that we have had adequate food. We also have a hormone called ghrelin. This is a hormone that peaks before we eat, and it falls after our meal. And it's an important hormone in that it stimulates our appetite and our eating. These are all short-term mechanisms that occur with each meal. We also have long-term mechanisms that really are regulated by and help to determine the nutrients in our blood and storage site. The major hormone here you should know is leptin. Leptin is a hormone produced by adipocytes. The production of leptin leads to a decrease in appetite and food intake. It also promotes the metabolic rate and more energy consumption. One thing you should know about leptin is that in some individuals, they can have what we call leptin resistance, where the body no longer responds to normal amounts of leptin. In these individuals, they often don't have a decrease in appetite or food intake for a long-term nutrient regulation, and they don't benefit from that increase in metabolic rate and energy consumption. This is one of the hormones that's implicated in the metabolic dysregulation that occurs in obesity. This is our brief overview of the GI system. It was not comprehensive, but these are the key concepts that individuals need to know when thinking about health and disease.